Welcome to the Dividend Talk podcast, episode 155. All we know about dividend tax and how we deal with it. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, Dividend Talk is the place to be for insights, analysis, and unsalted advice on how to make the most of your money through dividends with our own unique European flavour. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and join our community on Facebook at Dividend Talk. See you on the inside. Hey, European DJ. How are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm really, really good. When people are listening to us, then we are probably on vacation because this is a show that we are pre-recording. It is a Sunday now in June. It's raining outside, so the perfect time to do some pre-recording. But how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm flying out for my vacation tomorrow. So when this podcast is released, I'll possibly be nearly on the way home, I would imagine. But yeah, I can't wait. It's an exciting day. There's lots of us going. So there's 4 different families, all ranges from kids from 18 months up, and the excitement is building in the house. So I can't wait. I can't wait for it. But hey, you have rain. We've got sunshine here in Ireland. It's been incredible the last 2 weeks. We've had nothing but sun. You can see I'm nearly bright red. I can hear dividend waves screaming at me to load up on factor 50. But it's yeah, it's good times. But we have an interesting show today, all about dividend taxes. This is one of our most requested shows, I would say. A lot of people are asking about this.
Yeah, because it's also a complex topic for many of us, right? So maybe also good as a disclaimer, we are not tax advisors, of course, but we do have experience with this, and we do also have opinions about this, right? And some of the questions are also about our opinion. So I'm really looking forward to clarify a little bit of this, maybe also to demystify, but also show the reality of the complexity and how it influences us, especially also in Europe, right? But this, I think, also applies to the US investors that are listening, because if they are investing internationally, they will also be exposed to some of these troubles that we are experiencing.
Yeah. But before that, we usually have some news of the week items. Given that this is pre-recorded, the news could be stale by the time we release this. So maybe you'd like to share your highlight of the year so far.
Yeah, so for me, the highlight of the year is, of course, to see that compounding works. Yeah, I'm still, of course, saving a lot of money. So if you look at my investment returns, most of that is still a result of my monthly savings. I think that's important to know, because sometimes people see these dividend growth numbers and they think like, whoa, but most of us in the early stages or even midway where I am, it's still largely due to net contributions that are being invested and the dividend coming out of that. So that's why also in my annual report, I really look at the organic dividend growth to really see if my portfolio is compounding. Now, my portfolio has not always been so well in compounding because of the kind of, how you said, kind of dividend stocks that I own. But for instance, this year, we just learned that Shell, and that's really the highlight for me this year, did again a 15% dividend hike. It's the second one in 1 year, two times 15%. It's my largest position in terms of value and in terms of dividend income. So for me, a 15% dividend hike, the second one in a single year, let's say fiscal year for Shell, is for me really boosting my dividend income, and it shows just the power of compounding. It's really amazing. So I took, of course, a hit when they did the dividend cut in 2020, but if I look at where I'm coming from and where I'm now, this will really give me lots of additional cash income, and just this income probably, that if I would needed to invest it, it's probably the same as, like, I don't know, 3 months of investment, right? And that's really the power of compounding. I need less and less monthly savings to grow my dividend income in the way as I need to grow it according to my financial plan.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, Shell, actually, I've just checked. Shell have regained top spot in my portfolio as well. They're hovering around top 2, but they're top as well. And that 15, as you said, a second 15% dividend hike is pretty damn nice. Pretty damn
And
nice.
is that in terms of dividend income, second spot, or
Uh,
is it in terms of portfolio value?
No, just portfolio value. I have a
Okay.
couple of high yielders in there, like Altria, Legal in general, and that would be above it. There's quite some high yielders in my portfolio, but in terms of value, they are top spot at the moment.
Oh, nice, nice.
For
So
me,
what's your highlight?
yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I recently did my half year check in with my wife. We sat down and we had a presentation at the beginning of the year. I really wanted to focus on different things, and she had her own focuses, such as paying off the mortgage, paying down any existing loans, and so on. And we are on track, which was I didn't think we would. I thought it'd be something that we'd maybe do in January, February, and we would fall off. So I'm quite proud of both of us, particularly my wife. She's after getting a lot better with investing, so she has her own portfolio.
Mhm.
She's investing in ETFs because stock picking is she's not that confident to do that yet. But it's just good to see her actually sticking with it and putting in that money each and every month.
Nice.
For me, I haven't lost any money in options this year, which I'm quite happy about. I do have to give a shout out to Rafa. I know you were talking to him on Twitter and stuff, but he seems to be doing quite well in terms of his strategy, managing dividend income and option trading, which is nice to see. I have to say.
Yeah, because it's a complex matter. But again, I don't advise to our listeners to do options trading like that
No.
for additional income. But yeah, people that really have the time for it and are able to generate proper returns, that's of course really admirable. But
yeah, we spoke about this at length in episode 152. So yeah, definitely I would stick away from options. But my biggest achievement this year is honestly staying away from that. I know I have that, I would say, greed, that little bit wanting to accelerate the process a little bit more. But I'm learning just to trust the process, stick to dividends, boys and girls, and move along slowly. And it seems to be working. It's definitely a lot less stressful. I don't have to think about it as much, and it's just nice. But hey, look, we're here to talk about dividend taxes today. It's as you said, quite a complex topic, but maybe we'll start with an easy question. Why is dividend tax important?
Well, it's maybe of course no-brainer, right? But it eats away your return and your dividend income. So what I like about dividend tax versus tax on income is that generally it's lower. Yes, so it's better to be an investor than being an employee, if you have the choice, of course, because you will be able to have a more tax efficient income. So that's the good thing about dividend tax. And it's of course normal because we put our capital at risk. Yeah, you don't have that with income. Income is kind of guaranteed as long as they don't fire you. Yeah, and I think the government taxes that heavier for probably that reason, because if you're investing in it, yeah, you put your capital at risk, and dividend is a form of return on your investment. Yeah, the issue just is that it also eats into your performance. So if you are everywhere paying dividend tax, and even if you are double taxed, it can really eat into your returns, and it can also give you less dividend income. And that's why it's such an important topic for us as specifically European investors, but the same is in the US. By looking at, do you have, for instance, a tax-free option? We know they have it in England with the ISA. Here in Poland, we have it as well. If I believe the IKA or the IKZE, they have it in America with 401ks and such. But in the case of, let's say, the Polish system and the American system, from what I understand, you only get this money available when you're 60 plus or something like that. So it's locked up. You can compound it in a tax-free account. There are limits to how much you can invest, and that's why I always say max it out. I'm doing that to some extent with my wife's account. We're maxing out it in our tax, so we avoid paying dividend tax. But I want to live off the dividends before that age of 60. So that means that I need to look at dividend income in 5 to 10 years from now, which also means that I need to take the dividend tax on the chin. Yeah, but that's also, again, why it's such an important topic. But, let's face it, if you pay on average a 20% yield on tax or something, dividend tax on your dividends, then you can compound it and you can reinvest it at a 20% less, and this can easily mean hundreds of thousands euros in difference in your total portfolio value after 30 years of investing. So we're talking about a lot of money here.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to say, just listening to the first part of what you were saying there, it shows the complexity of Europe, because you were talking there saying that dividend income is not taxed as income, whereas I'm going to have Irish listeners that are listening to this going, actually, in Ireland, it is treated as income. It's not separated. So Ireland citizens would be charged as income for their dividend income, and it just shows that Europe is we've got so many different countries with different rules. It is really, really complex. But that again is only for an Irish citizen in Ireland. It's different for a Dutch citizen investing in an Irish company and receiving dividends. So it's really, really is a complex subject, and you can understand why Europeans are so confused compared to our US counterparts, because they have one rule and that's it, and it applies to them all, whereas we have different countries, different rules, and it's easy to miss a lot of information on this.
Because we also don't have a single European stock market where we all get the same dividend yield. Because, I mean, if Americans want to invest internationally, they will have to apply to the same dividend taxation that we are used to. But for instance, for me living in Poland, except Ambra, there's nothing else that I want to own in Poland that allows me to generate proper dividend income. So I'm naturally going to the Netherlands, to the UK, to Germany, to France, to the US. So I'm dealing with all these dividend tax issues effectively.
Yeah. So maybe you might want to explain a little bit how it generally works, particularly around the avoidance of double taxation.
Yeah, so what is probably good to know is that there's an organization or institution called the OECD. It's around trying to harmonize everything around economic development, and they have a typical template for the avoidance of double taxations, and then countries are typically using that as a basis for setting up their tax treaties between the countries. So take the example of Poland or the Netherlands. They will have, with every European Union country, they will have a tax treaty to avoid double taxation, also with America. Now, what's typically written in there? What are the standard clauses when it comes to dividends? That if, for instance, like in Poland, or no, let's say another country more, like if in Germany, you need to pay 26.75% dividend tax, which is a lot. There's typically a clause in there that as a citizen, you only need to pay 15% dividend tax, and the rest you can reclaim. Yeah. So what it means in here, that is, let's say if you live in Poland, or let's say if you live in the Netherlands, we have a lot of listeners also from the Netherlands. If you live in the Netherlands, then you can reclaim everything more than the 26.75% dividend that you paid from the German tax authority, and the 15% you don't need to pay as well in the Netherlands. You can say already that this dividend has been withheld at source in Germany, so you don't need to pay this dividend again in the Netherlands. Now, I know there are again some exceptions here, because from what I understand, in Belgium it works a bit different. In Belgium, you seem to have the dividend withheld at source, and then you still pay 30% dividend tax. That's my understanding. So that's of course insane. Yeah, that's insane if you live in such a country. Then you might even wonder, do you want to invest in dividend stocks at all, and maybe take more like an accumulating ETF or something like that, where you're not exposed to the dividends, but kind of go for a total return investment strategy, and then you use the 4% rule by selling off a little bit of your portfolio every year. Yeah, so this is what is typically in the OECD template for the avoidance of double taxation, but it makes it complex, because on your tax forms, typically, like myself in Poland, I then need to say, okay, I paid this kind of amount of tax, and I can deduct 15% for that, so that I don't need to pay that again in Poland, and that's what we call the avoidance of double taxation.
Yeah, and I think you have a really nice article on this that we must link to as well. I think you explain a little bit about that, but also giving some of the withholding tax rates by country, because it varies, doesn't it, quite a lot by country.
Yeah, definitely. And also, you pointed it also out right earlier to me, like it also depends on what you're looking at. because sometimes you live in a country where the dividend tax is relatively high, but then foreign investor get a favorable tax treatment compared to the citizen, and that feels already unfair. Yeah, so you might live in, I don't know, is it for instance in France or something like that, and you pay an almost 30% dividend tax, but then as a foreign investor, you only need to pay 12.8% tax or something like that, and that's of course unfair. But I think it's fair to say that if you go to some of the countries with the highest dividend tax rate, by far it's Switzerland with 35%. If you would invest in Switzerland as a foreigner, that's of course a lot. Yeah, that's really a lot. But then we have also Australia 30%, Belgium 30%. Slovakia 35%. I believe we have also Sweden with 30%, Finland with 35%. So these are really high. It's like a third of the cake is already gone.
Yeah,
It's just gone.
It's a lot. It's a lot of money, and look, sometimes it does impact me in making my investment decisions, particularly Switzerland, 35%. It's a lot, because giving away over a third of your money, it's psychologically that is so hard.
Yeah. We'll get later a little bit more talking about how we can avoid that entire number, right? By reclaiming taxes. But this is also maybe then a good time to speak about some of the better countries in Europe, right? Because we have, for instance, the UK, where 0% dividend is withheld at source. So that should make it really easy for people investing in the UK. I think the UK government does this also for that reason, right? To get foreign capital into the stock market. But there it's really simple. You don't on your tax form, you just say that you didn't pay dividend and you pay your local dividend tax there, right? Which you still need to pay. So that makes it so much easier. The Netherlands has 15%. That also makes it easy because you're already in line with the tax treaty.
Yeah.
So you don't need to do anything special there by reclaiming dividends. It's exactly on what's in tax treaty. So there are countries just in Europe that make it attractive to invest there. France is a tricky one because your dividends are withheld at a higher rate than the 12.8%. You need to reclaim that back there. But for instance, I know from the Kleine Kapitalist here that he has an account at ABN AMRO, and he fills in a form, and then automatically it's already withheld for him at 12.8%. So here it comes then to the broker, which we'll touch a bit later also on, whether you have this benefit. And I believe Alan from our Twitter group, he has the same with his bank in Sweden, that some countries and some banks do this already for you, specifically with a country like France, because they accept it a bit automated, that they take the dividends at the right source.
And then what about the US? Because most investors, let's face it, will invest in the US. Inherently, it's a 30% dividend withholding tax, but you can minimize that down to 15%.
Yeah, so most brokers have this, WB8EN form that you need to pre-fill, often on a yearly basis. It's important. Don't forget it, please, if you need to do it on an annual basis. But then it's all done automatically. You don't need to worry really about it. Then it's done for you, and they just deduct it to 15%. So that makes investing in US dividend aristocrats so easy, really easy.
Yeah, a lot easier to invest in America than some of our European countries, which is frustrating, I have to say.
Yeah, but check it with the broker, right? We had one time a guest from eToro, and he said with dry eyes that it's 30% dividend tax that he's paying, and he was a dividend investor. Yeah, I mean, then you're kind of fooling yourself, right? In this. So, but look, another country for me that's very attractive to invest in actually is Spain with 19%, and they have some nice dividend growth stocks there. I mean, you and I both own Enegas. I also own Red Electrica. You have Inditex there as well. Inditex, the owner of Zara.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't have really maybe the most modern industry, it has some nice dividend stocks. But also Poland is 19%. And you have also some interesting stocks here. I mentioned already before, I own Ambra, and that's for me actually the most interesting. But then I know some other investors also investing. Is it WeChat or something like that?
Yeah.
In one of those chat, live chat, I believe, live chat. There are some there's still some countries which you could say they're not too bad. Yeah, they're not too bad.
Yeah, and another question that is quite popular is how do you practically reclaim dividend tax? And I know you have some experience in this, you've wrote a blog about it, so you might talk us through some of your experiences.
Yeah, so what is important, right? There are a few things that you really need to take into consideration. First of all, it is bloody slow. It can take a long time before a country has deposited the money on your account. Secondly, there are really some. It's still a paper trail that you're creating, so sometimes it might not even be worth it to reclaim the text. If, for instance, you need to print paper, send it by mail, and then just the post stamps are already more than the dividends that you can reclaim. But generally, how it works for me, at least my experience, right, is I need to go to the tax office here in Poland. I can request online a form, a document that writes and declares that I am how is it, a tax resident in Poland, and that I've paid tax over the years that I'm reclaiming tax for. So because that's what the foreign countries asking for, like for instance Germany, a proof that you were a tax resident in that time, and that comes at a cost. In Poland, it comes about €5 or something like that, and I have to physically pick it up. So it also means that during working time, I need to go to the tax office to pick up that document. I can imagine that in some countries it's being automated, that you get it by mail or something like that, or I mean post, because often the foreign country requires a wet signature on it. Yeah. So that makes it already really difficult as a barrier to start with. Then, of course, you need to show all your dividend payments and that you actually paid the tax. Now, here becomes really tricky, because in the past, some countries were easier with accepting the statements from the likes of the Giro or something like that, and the screenshots. To be fair, my tax form from Germany was rejected. They didn't accept it because they are looking for dividend certificates now, and that's where a big issue comes in for me. And I wanted to start writing a blog post about that, because when you want to have a dividend certificate for the majority of the low-cost brokers in Europe, that's nearly impossible, or not even nearly impossible. If it's possible, it comes at a hell of a price. For instance, 100 or 150 euro per line item. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't have dividend taxes to reclaim for 150 euros. I think you need to be a millionaire. Yeah, talking about these kinds of levels. And that has to do just with the fact that most of these brokerage firms, they have it either outsourced, this work, or they are actually having your shares, let's say in a clearinghouse or something like that. I don't know what exactly is, but it comes really down probably to the ownership. So for me, I'm also sometimes wondering, like, okay, if I'm then not claiming the taxes back, is this clearinghouse doing that? And that's how they are earning a profit? I really don't know. But what's happening with these dividends? Yeah. So that makes it really difficult. And I have heard mixed messages. Some people are successful with, for instance, with the statements from the Giro to get the German tax back. I wasn't. It got rejected, but it only got rejected after 9 or 10 months, because the German tax office says like, oh, we're busy. I also know that there was an increased level of fraud, so they're also probably a bit more tighter there, because there have been some scams around reclaiming dividend tax. They have been widely in the news. And so there were some loopholes, so it became only harder for us. And getting dividend certificates from the low-cost brokers is almost not done. So if there are listeners here that know of low-cost brokers where you can easily get a dividend certificate at no cost, let me know, because it could be for me a reason to switch there quite quickly there. Now, but then, you know, what it also means for me, you need to fill in a form. It's usually online that you can fill in the form. Then you need to put all the rows in. You need to pay in the ISAI numbers if you go again to the German tax form. You need to print everything. and before you know it, you're really printing a stack of papers. It can be easily 30, 40 A4 in my case, depending on the amount of holdings you have in a country. Also, what is important to know is you don't need to reclaim tax every year. That's a good thing. You don't need to go through this paper trail every year. I believe Germany is for the last 3 years or 4 years. I don't remember it correctly, but something about that. I think Switzerland is the same. So you can pile it a little bit up, but before you do that, please check it. Check what the regulations are.
Yeah.
You can pile it a little bit up and do it at once. Of course, you have then a delay in your investment because you want to reinvest those dividends that you reclaim. So you technically you get a little bit of lower return if you pile it up. But I would definitely advise everyone who is investing anyway in foreign dividend stocks to at least try it. Try if they accept your documents, because it seems to be a bit of a lottery so far. So I've only tried it with Germany because that's where really the business case was clear for me. For France, I only own really Danone, so I didn't really have a business case, but I own Siemens, Munich Re, Allianz, that are big dividend payers. So I really want to get my dividends back, and I will resend again. I tried to get in touch with the German tax office, but that's nearly impossible. They don't pick up a proper phone there. I don't know what's happening in Germany here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems the barrier to reclaim your dividend tax is quite high, particularly if you have low-cost brokers. And we get asked questions all the time about which brokers we recommend, what are the pitfalls. And this is one we probably skip over a little bit, but it's definitely one of the cons of having a low-cost broker, because there has to be, look, they have to make money somehow, don't they? So maybe they try and do it with this kind of a method, but as an investor,
but it becomes really a problem once your portfolio value or your dividend income becomes larger. Then it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I mean, 100 and what you say, 100, 150 euro for a certificate or per line item, even
per line item.
So that's a lot of money, and I don't ever envisage I'll have enough dividend income to cover that many line items. But the EU must be aware of this. Like the EU Commission must be aware of this. Are they doing anything to help us? Are they doing anything to help investors?
Well, actually, since 2004, they're already trying to fight it. Yeah, so they're already calling on member states to stop discriminating towards individuals trying to reclaim dividend tax. They're really asking governments to make the process as easy as possible, as lightweight as possible, to support us. So they're pretty much aware of this, but I think countries don't have an incentive there. It is like typically with companies. So governments, when they criticize companies, they need to stop with that, politicians, because they are not able to guide their tax offices to make this easy for us. Because if you buy something, you pay within a second. If you reclaim, if you turn something in, you usually need to wait 30 days or whatever it is before you get your money back. Companies don't like that because it has a cash flow impact. The government is not even a single inch better. They do exactly the same by throwing up all these barriers. It's for me, it's if you think about dividend tax in Europe, it's one of the biggest scams out there.
Yeah.
Really, it's a public scam, and it really should be stopped. And in 2022, there was a nice initiatives where they did kind of a citizen consultation regarding taxation of dividends received by individuals. We put it in the community. Many people responded. Many people also left their opinions. And now it's waiting what happens to that, right? I know that I read the outcome of it, and it pretty much reflects all what we are experiencing. Also, the priorities are there identified. I tried to get in touch with the people behind that report to see if we can help them further, to volunteer as well. But no response again. I don't know what it is with bureaucrats, but somehow they seem to be as ineffective as the processes themselves. So sometimes I wonder, is the process or the people? But I don't expect anything before 2030, to be honest. Really not. But the idea here is also that it could get automated in Europe, right? They want to do a lot of this digital as well, which would already be a game changer, right? That we could this digital, like what we have with the US, what exists with France, that all the brokers could just connect to it, and it will be done automatically. That our data is automatically, at least, maybe not shared. I hope they do it on the blockchain kind of there. But that this becomes all flawless, because that would really, really help us, right?
Yeah, automation would be key. I would prefer if they all took the UK stance and charged us no withholding tax at all, because that's the easiest method. Then you're only dealing with your own country.
Yeah,
It would by far be the easiest method. But look, we know things in Europe move quite slowly when you're trying to get 30 odd member states to agree on something. So I'm not even confident that we'll get something by 2030. I'll be honest.
Yeah, no, let's see. But this is one of the painful topics, of course, for us here.
Yo, some great breaking news here, because this podcast was pre-recorded, but literally 2 days later, we get news that the European Union is proposing changes to the withholding tax procedures. I spoke about it last week a little bit with Thiago Diaz already, but in short, they are aiming to promote fairer taxation, fight tax fraud, and support cross-border investment across the bloc. They acknowledge that the problem is that the refund procedures are often too lengthy, costly and cumbersome, and that it's also causing frustration for retail investors and discouraging cross-border investments within and into the European Union. In this proposal, there are a few key actions proposed. First of all, a common European Union digital tax resident certificate. This should allow investors with a diversified portfolio in the European Union will only need one digital tax resident certificate to reclaim several refunds during the same calendar year. The second action is 2 fast-track procedures, one which will be relief at source procedure, and the second one is a quick refund system, which will make the relief process faster and more harmonized across the European Union. Member states can choose themselves. And the third one is a standardized reporting obligation, so that certified financial intermediates will have to report the payment of dividends of interest to the relevant tax administration so that the latter can trace the transaction. Good news here, it won't be 2030, the proposal should come into force by the 1st January of 2027. Guys, this is awesome news, and let's continue with the show.
There is one other area. I know we're dividend growth investors and it's the name of the show, but we do always get questions in around ETFs. ETFs constantly come up. And what about from a tax perspective there? I know we got a question from Kevin. He says, look, he knows they're not our favorites, but accumulating dividend ETFs have a tax of 30% in Belgium, whereas their tax, I think, 15% in the Netherlands. So there's different tax rates for ETFs, and are they more favorable for dividend investors to invest in ETFs rather than dividend stocks?
Yeah, so I think what he's mentioning here is like you're accumulating ETFs where the dividends are automatically reinvested, so you don't get a distribution from the ETF.
Yeah.
So this is what I mentioned. Then you're really investing for a total return, and then you need to ask yourself, do dividends and dividend aristocrats provide the best total return? I still think so, yeah, because it shows that it's a stable business that can reinvest, that can pay out dividends and let them grow to their shareholders while also developing their business. That shows just that these are blue chip companies with a strong moat typically and lots of pricing power. But then you might also consider growth stocks more and mix it up a little bit. But then you're really doing a total return investing. Then you wouldn't be living off dividend income, but rather of, selling your portfolio at the time of retiring, and you really go then for the 4% rule. And this is like you sell 4% of your portfolio value per year to be able to live off that, and assuming that your portfolio grows by 5 or 6%. So still there should be a little bit of slow compounding going on. The risk of course is there that in a downturn you need to sell more at the bottom. So if your portfolio goes down by 50%, it will be 8%. But to be honest, how often does it happen that the stock market drops 50%? It happened in 2008, and probably the time before in the 80s, maybe. Yeah. So it is unlikely that it happens that much, right? So sometimes they speak in these scenarios and create a lot of fear mongering, but in reality, out of the 10 years, you have probably 7 good years where it's growing faster, and where your portfolio continues to grow, maybe 2-3 slim years. Yeah. So it really depends on, are you going on a fat retirement or on a slim retirement, fat fire? I think that's the difference more.
Yeah. One interesting thing from an Irish perspective is dividend income from ETFs are charged at a higher rate than dividend income from companies. So it's called an exit tax, and you are charged at 41% in the year that you receive that income. Really, ETFs is horrible in Ireland. It really is. Which is why, Kay, you do mention ETFs are not our favorite, but pretty much the tax in Ireland for me is the reason why it's so hard to invest in these guys. I do have one final question, and I touched on it earlier on, but does dividend tax influence your investment decision?
Yes, to some extent. Well, yes, definitely. Because I look, what I usually do, and actually I don't use it a lot on social media, but I often calculate for myself the yield after tax. So that's why, no, that neutralizes a little bit my investment decision, because you mentioned, investing in Switzerland. Oof. But I don't mind holding a Swiss company if it gives me a proper yield after tax. So let's say an American stock has 15% and a Swiss stock has 35%. If the one would, I don't know, if they both would yield, let's say 3% after tax, for me, then it's an equal investment decision. Of course, you should wonder like what's happening here, because maybe the payout ratio is higher at the Swiss company at that time. So there might be that the dividend safety profile of the US is by definition almost better. But there are examples sometimes where you could make a case for a Swiss company in that regard. So it doesn't make it necessarily that you have more availability, that way of thinking, of that your stock universe suddenly increases by thousands. No, but it at least doesn't prevent me from saying like, no, Switzerland is an entire no-go. And I still intend to reclaim those Swiss dividends back at a certain moment in time once it's worth for me doing it, because I also don't want to miss out on great compounders. And that's the nice thing then looking at the yield after tax. But I also entirely understand it when people say like, I only invest in the US, the Netherlands, and the UK, because that's the 15% that I stick to, and that works for me. Because honestly, if you invest in the US, the UK, and the Netherlands, you probably have a full worldwide exposure. For instance, you can buy Unilever, you have a whole international portfolio, and then Unilever looks at all the dividend optimization for you. British American Tobacco, the same, ASML, and then you have the whole US stocks. So you will have a global exposure by just the nature of holding those stocks in your portfolio. For me, just Germany is still so attractive with the companies there to still really want to invest in there.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I'd probably would be in that boat, sticking to those types of countries, just to make it's just a lot easier. Tax is complicated, and sometimes even if you fill out the wrong tax, you can get penalized as well. So you do really need to sit down with someone that understands when you're filling out these tax forms as well, particularly, as I said, when you're going into countries like Germany, Switzerland that have higher withholding tax rates. So I'm a big believer of the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and that's what it is.
Well, it's probably good to know, because Joris also asked about this, right? Here, I have a calculator on my website, an early retirement calculator. We can put the link in the description of the show, and you can put there the tax rate in there to calculate your future dividend income that you need and the impact of it. And you can play with that. So you can. My average tax rate, by the way, without reclaiming taxes, is around 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, so I pay already 19% because I'm a Polish citizen. So 15% I don't need to do anything with that, but the other 4% I need to do on top. But then if I take my whole portfolio, I think it's 20.9% or something like that is my tax rate. So, and I can bring it maximum down to 19%. So for me, even though investing in Germany and such, looking at how my portfolio distribution is, I'm not so inefficient at the moment. So. Yeah.
Very good. Well, look, that's taxes. It is, as you said, it's a hard subject. Sometimes it's not really an interesting subject either, but it was requested, and European DJI did his very best to try and simplify a lot of terminology, a lot of terms there. So I hope you find this useful. But do remember, as we said, we're not financial advisors, particularly when it comes to tax. So if you're in doubt, please contact a financial advisor.
Yeah, definitely.
But with that, we do have a couple of listeners' questions that we'll jump into. One is from Casper, and he has asked us, what is our view on DRIP? Yeah. So Caspar has said that he personally doesn't understand why one should do this. And I think that depends. I am with him sometimes. If you're looking to buy companies at a value basis at a low cost all the time, drip investing is probably not something you should do. But if you have someone like Johnson & Johnson or Microsoft or these type of AAA companies that you just want to keep buying over and over and over and not really look at the share price, then it definitely has a place. So I don't have drip enabled because none of my brokers allow it. I don't think interactive brokers allow it, so I can't do it anyway. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. But I definitely do see it being really good for your core foundational stocks.
So interactive brokers does allow it. You get a message in the corporate actions where you can then make your decision. I've been doing this always for the Dutch stocks when I had Bink Bank at the time. Also, Saxo Bank allows it. And I just really like it because I don't need to think about it. And it is, I mean, if I look at how many Shell shares I received by reinvesting, it is something beautiful. It is really something. You see the share count growing. And actually, also the commissions are lower than the typical investment commissions if you will buy the stock out of hand. So I do love the beauty of it because it goes automatically and you can see it grow, and it really shows you the impact of compounding. For all the rest, I do reinvest the dividends. I would generally, if I would have the option to do for every stock drip or not, I would do the following. I would turn it on for all the stocks that I think are undervalued or fairly valued, and I would turn them off for the ones that I think are really richly valued. So I wouldn't turn it on for Microsoft. I wouldn't turn it on for Apple. I wouldn't turn it on for Munich Re at the moment, but I would turn it on for most of the other half of my portfolio, let's say, and just let it do it because it is really beautiful to just see it.
Pretty good. And Tim has asked us, why is starting yield important in order to reach your FIRE target?
Well, it depends again on what I mentioned before. If you do this early retirement calculator, it will tell you that. Yeah. So you need to the power of compounding is fueled by the amount of dividends you can reinvest. So for me, a starting yield, therefore, of 3.25% on average and a 6% dividend growth give me kind of a Chowder rule of 9.25. And that allows me to realize my dreams. Yeah. So I need to stick to my financial plan. If I go lower, I require more dividend growth. But you need to balance it out. If you go for a lower yielder, let's say in the 1%, it needs to grow probably 10% for 20 years. But I don't want to wait 20 years. Yeah, my goal is around retiring in 15 to 17 year. And for that, the starting yield is important. However, I do it as an average. So if I buy a higher yield, I can also buy a lower yield in return, and I mix up a little bit the stocks in my portfolio with that. But yeah, on average, I need it. I don't want to wait 30 years by buying Microsoft and Apple at these valuations right now.
Yeah. In essence, the higher the starting yield, the more money you will earn to reinvest, and compounding will happen quicker. You don't want to wait, as you said, like companies like Visa, that, to be fair, do have high dividend hikes of 20%, 15, 20%, but it's going to be 20, 25 years before they start to overtake the likes of, I don't know, maybe Johnson & Johnson or...
well, at that growth rate, it will be a bit earlier, but so then it might be actually at the same time of our retirement date, and then they will compound probably also quicker. But there's one catch to this. Which of the companies that now that are yielding at around 1.5% do you think for the next 10 years will grow their dividend about 15% with 15% CAGR? Sorry, I don't know. It is possible, we see it, but usually in hindsight. But for, let's say, Home Depot or something like that, but I couldn't have imagined that, like say, like a building shop 10 years ago, that this would indeed compound with 15% CAGR. I find that really hard to predict. So I usually am more conservative in my predictions.
Yeah, I mean that's the angle. It's impossible to predict that. You can't. God only knows what will happen in the next 15 years in the economy. You don't know, so it would be pretty damn hard to predict.
Maybe something like ASML could pull it off. If you ask me today, yeah, I find it hard to predict these kinds of things. I can kind of predict that they have a catalyst and probably are in having a tailwind, like Microsoft now with the cloud, and then artificial intelligence will do well also for a company like Microsoft. Yeah, but for instance, for Unilever to say what is the tailwind is a bit harder now. It's also a total different company, but who knows? Maybe they find something and they surprise us, and they are the next compounder with 15% annual growth rate. Who knows? Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's the last question we had. I think it was a good topic. I hope people learned an awful lot from this. And again, keep the questions going, and we'll see you all next week. Remember, both of us at Dividend Talk are not certified financial specialists through formal education. We are just two guys sharing our journey for inspiration and entertainment purposes. Hence, this is not investment advice. Although we do our best, we can't promise that the information discussed is always correct, nor appropriate for you or anybody else. We always recommend that you do your own due diligence and be accountable for your own choices. As we always say, you can't borrow conviction from others. Last but not least, by listening to our podcast, you agree to hold us harmless from any ramifications, financial or otherwise, that occur to you as a result of acting on information provided in this podcast.